Hope that you've had a good week. And this past week, we made a trip down Friday to finish up after really turned out to be a very quick month here. Got most everything taken care of. Amber and Jack and Anna Lynn are still in Philadelphia. They were there for a couple reasons this trip, and they still have a graduation party to attend today and some things to finish up at the house, and that should get us completely finished. Having said that, I got in at about 11:30 last night in my big Ryder truck. I feel like I have a few loose teeth and probably a few loose screws, and so we will enter into class with that in mind. I'm going to start by asking a question, and this is just something for you to think about. I did this several years ago. Has to be, I know 15, but maybe even longer than that. Maybe closer to 20 years ago. I was in a group of a Facebook group, I believe, if I remember correctly, and I had added lots of preachers to that group, and we would bounce things off one another occasionally, or discuss this or that, and I asked a question one day. I don't remember what prompted it, but I asked this question. Looking back over your life as a Christian, what is the one thing that stands out? There likely are many things, but what is the predominant thing that stands out that you wish you had known more about or understood better before becoming a Christian? And the plan for this material was to use it with the youth. I think I wrote a series of articles or something along those lines for the youth where I was working at the time. So let that soak for just a minute. If you have something that you would like to share, that would be fine. If not, that's fine as well. But just think about it. I'm sure you'll come up with something. And I have a fairly extensive list that we're going to try to work our way through for this class. They say hindsight is what? 20/20. How many of us have thought we had an understanding of something, only to find out a little bit later, I really didn't know a whole lot about what I thought I knew, right? There are certain things that come to my mind, and perhaps some of you have those thoughts that quickly jump into mind as well. You know, time and experience and study and things of that nature have an effect on our understanding, and so it's valuable to look back. It's valuable to evaluate, to take some time and to think about not only things that you believe, but why you believe them, and how you've come to that understanding. And really, honestly, that's the secret of faith. That's where faith is built and developed. Faith is not an intellectual knowledge of what the Scripture teaches. It's just simply not. It's so much more than that. That's good, and that's a right foundation, and that's solid, but it's so much more than that. For example, I remember a college-age young man who he'd been a member of the church for a number of years, but he'd been brought up in the church, as we say. His parents were members, I think maybe grandparents, and so he was a generational type Christian, as we might say. Went off to college, of course, ran into things that you would expect, worldly things, even in the realm of religion. And I remember him saying, as a Christian, as a young man home from college, and I think in particular he was, well, I don't know if that's right or not. Let's just say it was instrumental music. I'm not positive. But there was a subject that he had really had to wrestle with. He said, I always knew we didn't use the instrument, but I had no idea why. Well, I would submit to you that his faith in that particular subject had not fully matured until that point. He knew, but he really didn't know. He knew a fact, he didn't know why. He didn't understand any of the arguments or anything of that nature. And so it's a valuable thing to be able to look back, to examine. And this is biblical, right? In principle. A host of verses come to mind. Romans 15:4 reminds us of what? The things that were written aforetime were written for what purpose? Our learning. Like there's a reason why God has revealed what He has revealed. And it's important. And we can learn from it, and we must learn from it. Because those who do not learn from the past are, and really, if you look at the world, it just runs in cycles, doesn't it? It just loops. You hear sometimes, I just don't know if it can get any worse. Oh, it can. If you know anything at all about history, it can get a lot worse. A lot worse. And so things just tend to repeat if we do not learn from them. A host of passages come to mind in that regard. In the book of Hebrews, in particular in chapter 3, there is a principle that the Hebrew writer, or this principle is present. The Hebrew writer uses it in the book, throughout the book. And he'll talk about in chapter 3 the example of Israel. And what did they fail to do? Remember, he talks about the children of Israel and what God had planned to do with them, and what did they fail to do? They failed to be obedient to God. Did they trust Him? No. Yeah, they were unbelievers. That's what the Bible tells us. They didn't enter in. They didn't enter into what, incidentally? Promised land, or rest, as the writer will use that term a little bit later. So verse 19 states, so we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. They were unbelievers. And it's this verse where he begins this pattern. We see this, let us do this. And it runs throughout the book. We see this, learn from that. Don't make the same mistake they made. Don't follow their example, but rather do this. And so we find this pattern throughout. the wisdom of those who have come before must not be ignored, right? In a book about studying the Bible, Brother Wayne Jackson said on one occasion, or wrote rather, and this is a paraphrase, but he said, "Show me the man who studies only the Bible, and I will show you a man who knows very little of it." Now, is that a shot against studying the Bible and using it alone? No, not at all. His point is that there is a wealth of information that's been made about. You and I stand on that, whether we realize that or not. The things that we know, the things that we understand, the things that we have no doubt studied on our own, we stand on the shoulders of those who come before us. Someone taught me, just like someone taught you the gospel. And so that was his point, that there is a plethora of information, of wisdom, of knowledge that has been made available. And we can buy it in written form. We can buy it in digital format now. And it's searchable. Right here on the other side of the building, there is a work that's been around for a long, long time, right? And I have in digital format every spiritual sword, well, up to the time that I bought it. It's probably missing a few through the years, but I have in digital format all previous publications of the spiritual sword. It's interesting to go back and look at those articles and see the things that were relevant, see what they were writing about, what was, the hot topics. Many of them are the same. Many of them are different. And so there are some ways that it's outdated. There are some ways that it's very, very prevalent. It is very important for us to learn from the past. And so if I don't learn from the past, what happens? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think we can grow unless we can see an accurate picture. And sometimes that involves looking back. If I'm doing what Paul said and I'm examining myself, then that necessarily requires looking back, looking over my life, etc. In 1912, the largest and most advanced ship ever built set sail across the Atlantic. What ship was it? Yeah, the Titanic. And what did they say about the Titanic? Unsinkable. Unsinkable. On board that ship were experienced operators. And what did they do? Anybody remember? They ignored the warnings that were given. Icebergs ahead, dangerous conditions, slow down. But the Titanic is unsinkable. And so they pressed right along. Those warnings came from ships who had already passed through those treacherous waters. Those who had gone before relayed the message, and the message was ignored. And now we're still sending, been doing this for a number of years now, submersibles down to look at and investigate and that sort of thing, the shipwreck. So why did the ship sink? Was it because the icebergs? Was it because the ship was poorly built? Why did it sink? Yeah. Ignored warnings, a pride and an arrogance that said, I don't have to listen to this information. And so just an illustration to help drive home the point. It does not matter the area of life, field of expertise. Has medicine advanced? Absolutely. Why? Well, because throughout the generations, we've built upon that knowledge. And there is a way in which we can do that as well. So let's look at what will be the first of these questions. The first study really is very broad, but we're going to try to hone in on it a little bit here. You'll see what I mean here in just a second. But the first response was, or the first one that we're using, these are in no particular order, how strong the lure of temptation can be. How strong the lure of temptation can be. So let's define our subject. What is temptation? If you had to put that in your own words, how would you describe that word? Temptation. Yeah, that's a good one. That's kind of the one I use. We'll go to James here in a little bit, but James uses that language, a lure. As I've said before, I like to fish, and in particular to bass fish. And one of the things that you'll learn is that if you bass fish for any length of time, one day they'll bite a certain lure. The next day, you just feel like you're wasting your time. They won't look at it, seemingly. Don't want to eat it, don't want to bite it. But it worked previous, right? Something's changed. And so they're no longer taking the bait, if you will. The word can be translated as a trial, a test, to prove or to examine. One dictionary states the following: the words have a sinister connotation in present-day usage. All right, so think about that for a second. When we talk about temptation, what typically comes to mind? Temptation to sin. But he's making the argument that was not always the case. Originally, he writes, the words were of neutral content. The idea of meaning, or the sense being putting to proof or testing of character or quality. We may touch on this in a moment in James, but some have the idea that James uses those words that way. Trials, and then a shift to temptation. We know in the latter part of that discussion, he is talking about temptation to sin because he describes the process. And that may very well be the case, that he's talking about the trials that they face, the tests, the proving, the examination, if you will, and then a shift to the idea of temptation to sin. We'll talk about that a little bit more. In Exodus 17, verse 2, Israel is said to tempt God. to tempt God. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses and said, Give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, Why do you chide with me? Wherefore do you what? Tempt the Lord. Well, what does that mean? They're testing him. They're proving him. Right? Psalm 78, verse 18. Again, written about the same time frame. And they tempted God in their heart by asking meat for their lust. It carries the idea of proving, examining. And in Hebrews 3, verse 9, a chapter that we referenced a moment ago, the writer uses the same language. When your fathers tempted me or proved me and saw my works 40 years. And so that shows us that this word can be used in that way. But it can also mean temptation to sin. Now, in this regard, can God be tempted to sin? No. That's what James tells us. God cannot be tempted to sin. That's correct. He does not tempt us to sin, does he? James would say, neither tempteth he any man. But can God tempt us? Meaning, try us, prove us, etc. Okay? So, the word doesn't necessarily have to mean a enticement to sin. There can be a different usage of that. It doesn't necessarily mean a negative connotation automatically. So sometimes the context will help us there. So we'll look at James here in just a moment. But I want to go back to the book of Genesis. The question then becomes, well, why are temptations so strong? Like, here's this idea of temptation to sin, but why is it that we struggle with this? The question was, or the response was, I wish I would have known or had a better understanding of the lure of temptation. So why is that so strong? We'll go back to Genesis chapter 3. In Genesis 3, the first 6 or so verses, we have the account of the temptation in the garden. There's a great deal that can be learned here in this regard. Now, this could be a very, very broad subject. We could talk about the nature of man as it relates to temptation, because that's a very important subject. God said we are made in His image. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean we look like God? He has 2 arms and 2 legs and that sort of thing? What does it mean that we are made in the image of God? Okay, perhaps. Yeah, perhaps with his character. What else comes to mind? Okay. Yeah, yep, yep. When Adam and Eve were created, what did God say of the creation? It was very good. They were made in His image. And for some time in the garden, they existed perfect, sinless. I don't know how long that was. I don't have any time frame here. But they existed that way for some amount of time. The very image of God. Now, I think this concept goes much, much deeper in that God has created us with certain abilities. We have, like God, the ability to learn, to take in information. We have the ability to reason, to think through that particular information. We have the ability to understand it, to comprehend it. That's what separates us from all the other creation, incidentally, isn't it? What's the difference between humanity and animal life? We have a soul, and with that soul comes everything that we're laying out. And so these are all things that we find as it relates to man within Scripture. That's very, very, quick flyover, so to speak, of that concept. Did Adam and Eve understand God's command, for example? Don't eat of the tree. Got it. And for some time they did that. They understood. In fact, when Satan questions her about it, what did she say? God has said. She has this ability to learn, to comprehend, to understand. This is off limits because God said it's off limits. This is what He commanded or what He said. And so man has that ability. That's important for us to understand. So they existed for some time without sin, without eating of the fruit of the forbidden tree. But then there's chapter 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more what? Cunning. Yeah. Crafty. Wily. Knowing my audience in here, young people don't get this anymore. You date yourself sometimes, but I know everyone in here will recognize Wile E. Coyote. Yeah. Crafty, cunning, right? Yeah. Yeah. They wouldn't last long in business today, would they? But wily because of what? Like every episode is the coyote trying to do what? He's trying to catch that roadrunner. Never could do it, could he? Only if that were true of Satan and humanity, right? But so here's this crafty, cunning, wily character that's introduced to us. And notice the very first thing that he says is what? Did God say this? That you can't eat of the the fruit of every tree of the garden? Did God say that? What's the emphasis of this question? What is he trying to do? Yeah. He's trying to get her to think. Do you suppose that she had ever really contemplated that thought before? Was every tree of the garden available to eat, with the exception of this tree? Every one of them. And they were good for food, and they were pleasant to the eyes. And so he brings this question out. And I kind of read this as maybe with a condescending tone. Did God really say this? Is that what he's done? So she responds, and we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. Now, I don't know where she got that information. It's possible God could have said, don't touch the tree. It's not recorded. It's possible that she understood that in the command not to eat of the fruit of the tree, they weren't even to go near it. I don't know what, necessarily that particular statement. I don't know, let me say it this way. I don't know exactly where she got it. But I do know this, she understood they were not to eat of the tree. And perhaps the impression, we don't even need to touch this. Like, this is off limits. So there's the response, and the serpent says what? You'll not surely die. You'll surely die, you'll not surely die. Remember, hear, believe, obey the truth. Hear, believe, obey a lie. All right, but verse 5 is important. For God doth know that in the day you eat thereof. All right, now, where is the emphasis here? Who's he pointing to? He's pointing to God. God knows that when you eat, your eyes will be opened. So what's the implication? God is withholding something from you that you need. And you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So there's a twofold idea within this text. Not only is the temptation directed toward Eve, there's an attack, if you will, then on Adam and Eve through the temptation, but there's also an attack upon whom? There's an attack upon God. Satan here is impugning the character of God. And I think that's probably true in every temptation to some degree. He's just holding you back. He doesn't want you to reach your full potential. And so look what happens through this discourse, and we're just kind of moving through this quickly, well, for time's sake, but look at verse 6 and what happens. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food. All right, time out. question. Had she seen this tree before? And when she saw it, what did she see? She saw that which was forbidden, which God had said, you do not eat of it, because when you eat it, you will surely die. And now she's gotten from there to seeing that the tree is good for food and pleasant to the eyes and a tree that's going to make her wise. What's happened? Yeah, her perception has changed. Mm-hmm.
Persuaded, desirous, wanting.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the serpent did to Eve, made her desirous, wanting something that she was told not to do in the first place.
Yep.
So he enticed her by, saying this, and this. So that's part of what James talks about leading up to sin.
That's right.
And that's what he did to Eve. Enticed her, persuaded her to do something she wasn't supposed to do.
That's correct. And that's the nature of this subject that we're talking about. Now, we're talking here about how strong the lure of temptation can be. Adam and Eve heard the voice of God. True or false? They communed with him. He walked with them in the garden. Again, don't know how long this transpired. Okay? But there was a relationship, if you will. There was the presence of God within their lives. And here is this temptation, and the lure of which is so strong that they can disregard what God has audibly said to them. How many of you have ever said, well, if God would just say that to me, and sometimes you hear people say, well, if God would tell me this, if God would say that. No. It's not the way that it works. Temptation by its very nature is powerful and strong. And further, it impresses upon our minds the weakness of man. It impresses upon our minds how weak we are. So we're going to touch on those things a little bit as we move forward in the coming parts of this study. So that's where we'll pick up, Lord willing, next week. Appreciate your good attention and comments, and we will stop there for today. Thank you.